There's a version of you that is being held hostage, not by your enemies, not by the economy, not by your past failures, by your own attachments, by the people you keep returning to, by the memories you refuse to bury, by the pain you have convinced yourself is identity. And the most disturbing part, you are the one holding the chains. Niccolo Machiavelli understood something about human nature that most people spend their entire lives refusing to accept. He saw that the greatest weapon used against men was not armies or tyrants, it was sentiment, the attachment to what once was, the loyalty to what no longer serves, the emotional debt that binds you to a past version of your life as if it were still alive. What if everything you were taught about loyalty, love, and memory was designed to keep you manageable? What if the people who hurt you are still controlling you, not because they are present, but because you are carrying them inside your head, rent-free, every single day? Today, we are going to do something uncomfortable. We are going to look at why you are still attached to the person who left, to the wound that shaped you, to the version of yourself that no longer exists. And we are going to apply the coldest, most effective psychology ever written, not to make you cruel, but to make you free. Stay until the end, because the final insight is the one they never teach you, the one that changes everything. Most people believe they are free. They believe they make their own choices, feel their own emotions, live according to their own values. But Machiavelli would call this the deepest illusion of all, the belief of the man who does not know he is in a prison because he has never tried the door. You are attached, and your attachments are not abstract, they are operational. They govern where your mind goes at 2 in the morning. They dictate which opportunities you reject because they feel like betrayal. They explain why you keep returning to the same conversations in your head, rehearsing what you should have said, replaying what they did, reconstructing a courtroom where you are always the righteous one and the verdict never comes. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that a deceiver will never lack victims. And the deepest deception is the one we run on ourselves. We deceive ourselves into believing that holding on is loyalty, that grief is love, that remembering the wound keeps us safe from it. It does not. It recreates it. Every person who wronged you has moved on. They are sleeping well. They are living their life with the comfortable self-justifications of someone who never looked back. And you are carrying them. You made them immortal inside your own psychology. You gave them a throne inside your mind that they never earned and cannot be removed from, because you believe somewhere deep down that releasing them means they won. This is the invisible prison, not built from bars and locks, built from meaning you attached to things that were never meant to define you. Carl Jung spent decades studying what he called the shadow, the parts of the psyche we refuse to look at directly, the wounds we suppress because processing them feels like weakness. What he found was unsettling. The more you avoid a thing, the more it governs you. The emotion you will not feel controls you from below the surface. The person you refuse to grieve continues to haunt your present decisions. Seneca, writing nearly 2,000 years ago, warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, that most of our torment is constructed, that the mind, when left without discipline, becomes a theater that runs the same tragedy on a loop while the real world waits outside. And here is the question that matters. Ask yourself honestly, how much of your life right now, your decisions, your hesitations, your emotional reactions, is being directed by something that is no longer happening? How many choices are you making in the present that are actually responses to the past? That is the diagnosis, not weakness, not pathology, strategy being used against you. Because your attachments are not random, they were cultivated by people who needed you dependent, by a culture that profits from your unresolved grief, by systems that benefit from your inability to detach, to discern, to move with precision through the world. And the most powerful people in any room are always the ones who have learned what Machiavelli knew, that strategic emotional detachment is not the absence of feeling, it is the mastery of it. Where in your life are you being controlled through what you refuse to release? Think carefully, because the answer is where your transformation begins. We must make something clear, because the word detachment frightens people. They hear it and they think coldness, they think numbness, they think the emotional amputation of becoming someone who does not care about anything or anyone. That is not what Machiavelli meant, and it is not what we are building here. In The Prince, Machiavelli distinguishes between the ruler who is governed by fortune, by accident, by emotion, by the unpredictable currents of other people's decisions, and the ruler who exercises virtù. Not virtue in the moral sense, virtù as in capacity, as in the internal force that allows a person to shape circumstances rather than be shaped by them. Detachment in the Machiavellian sense is not about caring less, it is about caring strategically. It is the difference between a surgeon who operates on a patient they love and a surgeon who cannot operate because they love the patient too much. The surgeon who weeps at the table cannot cut cleanly, and your life requires clean cuts. Seneca understood this too. He wrote of the practitioner of philosophical detachment not as a man without love, but as a man who loves what is real rather than what he has constructed in his imagination. The grief you carry for a person who is gone is often not grief for who they were. It is grief for who you believed they would become, for the future that no longer exists, for the version of yourself that existed in that relationship and died when it ended. You are not mourning a person, you are mourning a story, and stories can be rewritten. Now, here is the Machiavellian shift that most people miss. Detachment is not the end of power, it is the beginning of it. When you are attached, emotionally entangled, reactive, dependent on external validation to regulate your internal state, you are predictable, and a predictable person is a controllable person. Anyone who understands your attachments understands your pressure points. They know what to say to destabilize you. They know which memory to invoke to make you compliant. They know which wound to press to make you retreat. Remove the attachment and you remove the lever. You become harder to read, harder to manipulate, harder to destabilize. You start to move through the world not as someone driven by emotional momentum, but as someone who chooses their emotional investments with the same care a chess player chooses their moves. Friedrich Nietzsche called this the revaluation of values. The moment a person stops inheriting their emotional life from culture, from trauma, from what they were told they were supposed to feel, and begins constructing it deliberately, not the elimination of depth, the relocation of it. You stop going deep with people who have not earned it. You stop pouring meaning into situations that cannot hold it. You begin to understand that your inner life is a resource, not a symptom. This is the shift from sentiment to strategy, from reaction to response, from being emotionally governed to being emotionally sovereign. And when you reach this point, something paradoxical happens. You actually become capable of deeper connection, because you are no longer connecting out of need, out of fear of abandonment, out of the terror of being alone with yourself. You are connecting from surplus, from choice, from a place that cannot be threatened. Those who have stayed, thank you, because what comes next is where the theory becomes a weapon, and most people will not make it this far. There are 3 cuts that Machiavelli's psychology demands, 3 domains where strategic detachment creates freedom. Think of them as surgeries, clean, precise, necessary. The first cut is from people, not from all people, from the ones you keep in your life out of guilt, out of history, out of the fear of what they will say if you leave. Machiavelli warned that a prince who relies on allies he cannot trust is weaker than a prince with no allies at all. The same is true of your relationships. The person who is emotionally loyal to you when life is easy, but disappears or turns hostile when the pressure increases, that person is not an asset. They are a liability disguised as connection. The test is simple. Remove the mutual benefit from the relationship and see what remains. If the answer is obligation, performance, or unspoken transactional debt, you are not in a relationship. You are in a contract that no longer serves you. Machiavelli did not advise cruelty. He advised clarity. You do not need to announce the cut. You do not need to burn the bridge or perform your detachment for an audience. You simply redirect your energy. You invest less. You observe more. You allow the relationship to reveal its true nature without forcing a confrontation that serves neither one of you. The second cut is from pain. This is the most counterintuitive of the three, because modern culture has taught you that your pain is your identity, that your trauma is your identity, that the wound defines the warrior. This is a lie with aesthetic packaging. Your pain is information. It was valuable once. It told you something was wrong. It pointed to a wound that needed attention. But you took the signal and made it a permanent resident. Jung's process of shadow integration is not about dwelling in darkness. It is about looking at what the pain was protecting, extracting the lesson, and releasing the emotional charge. The event happened. The event is over. What you carry now is not the event. It is your interpretation of the event. Your story about what it means about you, about others, about the world. And stories can be edited. The Stoics used a practice they called negative visualization, the deliberate contemplation of loss to inoculate themselves against the terror of it, not to become indifferent to life, but to stop allowing the fear of pain to make their decisions. You carry old pain not because it protects you, but because somewhere you believe releasing it means it didn't matter. It did matter, and releasing it proves that you are more than what happened to you. The third cut is from the past. This is the one that requires the most precision, because the past is not just memory, it is identity architecture. You have built your sense of self partially from what you have survived, what you have lost, what you were told you were in your formative years. And some of that architecture is load-bearing. Remove it too quickly and the whole structure collapses. Machiavelli understood that a prince who took a new territory had to make decisions immediately about what to preserve and what to destroy. He could not keep everything. Old systems protect old interests. You must audit your past with the same clarity. What from your history serves the person you are becoming? What is a story that you rehearse because it explains your limitations rather than your potential? The past is not neutral. It is actively involved in your present. Every assumption you make about what is possible, every default emotional reaction, every self-imposed ceiling has a root in something that happened before. Detachment from the past does not mean amnesia. It means no longer consulting the past as your primary source of evidence about what your future can contain. Now we arrive at the final truth, and this is the one that most people will hear and not apply, not because they cannot understand it, but because applying it requires something they are not ready to give up. Machiavelli wrote that men are more ready to repay an injury than a benefit, because gratitude is a burden and revenge is a pleasure. What he was describing was the human tendency to organize the self around deficit rather than surplus, around what was taken rather than what was built, around the injury rather than the capacity. Here is the paradox. The moment you truly detach from the people who drained you, from the pain that defined you, from the past that limited you, you do not become less, you become more. Not more comfortable, more powerful. Because everything you were using to maintain those attachments, the mental energy, the emotional vigilance, the cognitive real estate dedicated to grievances, to rehearsed arguments, to the management of wounds, all of it returns to you. And here is what no one tells you about detachment. The person who does not need, who is not dependent on your approval, your attention, your validation, is always the most compelling person in the room, not because they perform indifference, but because their energy is whole. It has not been distributed across 100 open emotional loops. It is concentrated, it is available, it is theirs. When Machiavelli described the prince who is loved but cannot be controlled, who is respected but not feared for his weakness, he was describing a psychology of surplus. A person who has detached from the need for outcomes, does not beg, does not pursue, does not perform. They build, they move, and they attract. Viktor Frankl, writing from the depths of a concentration camp, arrived at a conclusion that mirrors Machiavelli from the opposite end of the philosophical spectrum. The one thing that cannot be taken from a human being is the freedom to choose their response to any given circumstance. Between the stimulus and the response, there is a space. That space is where your sovereignty lives. Your attachments collapse that space. They make the response automatic, emotional, predictable. When someone mentions the person who hurt you, the response fires before you can choose it. When you encounter a situation that resembles a past wound, the old pattern activates without your permission. Detachment, real detachment, the Machiavellian kind, is the expansion of that space, the reclamation of that pause, the restoration of your ability to respond rather than react. Most people who hear this will not. They will feel it land. They will think, yes, this is what I need to do. And then they will go back to the conversation in their head, the one they have been having for months or years with the person who is no longer there. Not you. You are still here because you already know that the past is not a home, it is a memory, and memories, like all things, must serve the living or be released. The throne that your attachments occupy in your psyche is the exact space where your future belongs. The people you keep carrying are taking the seat that new possibilities need. The pain you refuse to release is using the energy that your vision requires. Detachment is not the cold act of someone who does not care. It is the precise act of someone who has decided to care about the right things, about what is real, about what is now, about what can still be built. Machiavelli built his entire philosophy on one foundational observation. The world is not what it should be. It is what it is. And the person who sees it clearly, without the distortion of sentiment, without the fog of wishful thinking, without the weight of what could have been, that person moves through it like a blade. You have been carrying what should have been let go long ago, not because you are weak, because no one showed you that releasing it was strength. Now you know. The question is what you will do with the knowing. Take a moment before you move through the rest of your day. Ask yourself which of the three, people, pain, or the past, has the strongest grip on you right now. Not rhetorically, specifically. Name it. Feel the weight of it, and then ask yourself one honest question. What becomes possible if I let it go? That answer is not behind you. It is waiting for you to arrive.